Hello, my fellow extraordinary Americans. My name is Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America? Well, you see, America has always been about freedom, opportunity, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt. Wealth and income inequality is the norm now, and the middle class has all but disappeared. So, Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and the descendant of immigrants restoring the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through financial education. It is through becoming entrepreneurs and investors on the light side. In this podcast, I interview fellow Americans who fought against the odds. Many of them came from humble beginnings to see how they did it. It is my hope through these interviews that the extraordinary within you shall awaken and that you will abolish financial slavery from your life and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Progress. Welcome back to the show, my fellow extraordinary Americans. For today, we have a special guest called Ian Norris. Ian is a business owner and a public speaker. He also has aviation in his blood. He spent most of his life in and around aircraft and airports, and his work experience includes everything from refueling and maintenance of aircrafts of all types to flying aircraft both in the general aviation and airline arenas. He's also passionate about excellence in communication. Some years ago, he realized there were similarities that can be found within communication between the pilot and air traffic controllers and communication between people and the business realm. Now, Ian shares those similarities with those wishing to take their relationships and communication to a new level and does so with colorful and interesting real world examples in his speaking engagements. He earned a degree in aeronautical engineering while in an apprenticeship with British Airways and his bachelor's degree in English language after moving to the United States. I'm really honored to have Ian in this show, and I'm grateful that he took the time to do this podcast. Ian, are you there?
Hey Cosmos, how are you?
I'm doing good, Ian. Thank you for taking the time to be here. How's your day going?
Thank you so much for asking me and having me on. And day's going great. Gorgeous weather, so it's going well.
Awesome. So, Ian, I know you're a business owner, you're a public speaker, and you've been in the aviation industry. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you got started?
Okay, yes. So most of my working life has been around aviation. And the earliest memory I have of that and my falling in love with that came from when I was in single digits age, probably about 8 or 9 years of age. My dad took me to an air show and I just fell in love with planes and it stuck ever since. I think initially it was the complexity of flying and the beauty of the form, the shape of aircraft that grabbed my attention, and knowing how the laws of physics play into that. All of these things coming together to make one beautiful art in my mind. That's what drew me to flying and aviation. So basically, once I left school, I went into that field, did an apprenticeship with a major airline, and worked on my A&P mechanics license. That's an airframe and power plant. And then shortly after that, right around the age of 22, I went on to get my pilot's license and pursued that side of things too. So as far as aviation goes, it continued on from there. And then I was able to turn it into a business, and I'm doing that, be able to pursue that, and also assisting my wife from time to time in her real estate business. So that is taking the aviation passion and moving it into a business or entrepreneurial field. Then, as you mentioned, rather, in the introduction, it wasn't until I moved to the States, having gotten married to a girl from Michigan, that I actually pursued flying seriously and went on to develop a career in that, and it took off, if you'll pardon the pun. Um, so that's essentially what got me started, and we've done a number of things along the way, but aviation just is in my blood. You mentioned that, and I just cannot separate myself from it. So there's a lot of history there.
So, Ian, how long have you been in the aviation industry for?
Oh, well, see, now I'm going to end up giving away my age. Let's say I go, okay, so in England at the time that I was at school, we graduated at 16, and I got into aviation basically from just before I left school, actually. But let's say 16, and I'm still in it. So we are looking at 34-ish years.
Wow, that's a pretty long time. So yeah, that's a lot of years. Like you're probably like an expert in a lot of things in the field altogether.
Well, I don't know that I'd call myself an expert, but I would say that I've come close to doing most of the different aspects of aviation, which require or revolve directly with aircraft and around aircraft. You know, groundwork, refueling, the flying we talked about, maintenance. I can't think of anything that I haven't done outside of airport management.
So Ian, what was your when you started your career in aviation and and all throughout the years, what was your overall vision and goal, and did it evolve over the years as you continued in this industry?
Okay, so the initial aspect or answer to that question actually will come up again later on, probably in our discussion, but it was essentially I'm always pushing myself to learn something new. Now, it may be new within my field, or it may be something completely new that I've never done before, but I've always had this drive. And a part of that, which we'll probably get to, is, a lack of self-esteem in certain areas that has driven me to become a bit of a perfectionist and just keep going, just keep learning, just keep taking in new stuff. So that was the first part. And then over time, I have developed an interest in taking the things that I've learned, taking the things that I'm picking up, the experiences and the life's lessons, and helping others with it, being able to share that when appropriate, and really just be more people focused. I haven't always been that way. So those are essentially the two driving thoughts in my mind.
So that's really interesting. Like being like normally people see aviation and like people like how did the drive for being people focused affect your give you the drive to do aviation of all things?
Okay, so to be honest, the drive for aviation, the passion for that came first. But in the process of flying, I had a lot of people ask me to take them for scenic flights, just local flights, non-revenue flights. And so I found a way to take what I absolutely was passionate about and give somebody else an experience of a lifetime. Many people only do that sort of thing in a small plane once. Obviously, airlines is a different scenario, but many people don't get to fly as low as I would take them, and be in a small or local setting and get that side of the view from the air. Normally you're used to being thousands of feet up there, tens of thousands of feet, and you're just going from A to B. So that's kind of how those two came together, was really people asking for those flights and the experience. And then as I gained more experience, as I had things happen and I found lessons in those myself, I then began to find ways or look for ways to apply those in my speaking and public engagements that way.
Wow, Ian, one thing I was I was think when I was doing your bio, the first one of the thoughts that came to my mind was all throughout human history, human beings never had airplanes. They only had airplanes only till the 20th century. So this is a completely new field. It's only been there for like 100 years, and like a lot of people would have been scared of flying altogether. So it takes a lot of like courage to like basically be somebody that wants to, at least in my perspective, to be someone that goes and like flies in the air, like tens of thousands of feet. above the ground. So like what is the internal thing that made you passionate about, like so passionate about it that it overcame all fear in the first place?
Well, again, I'll be honest and say that I never really had that fear. Um, my love of flying wasn't shaded or colored in any way by the size of the plane or the age of the plane. So I never really had to deal with that particular aspect. But certainly, I've had many passengers that struggled with the fear of flying, just that basic core fear. And essentially, I've been able to talk with them in before the flight and open that up to questions. Also, be able to um, explain certain aspects of it, whether they're looking for technical answers to the flying side of things, whether they're looking for just overall comfort, whatever it was that they needed, I would endeavor to find that, and I would endeavor to address that for them. There have been those that have been determined to go flying with me and still basically frozen inside the plane when we've gone up. And essentially, I would just be very focused on how they were reacting, how they were dealing with it, where I thought that they might be emotionally. And if necessary, we would just bring the flight to an end, but I would walk them through verbally each step. So I would do my very best to help them and walk them through those fears and concerns. I think that's basically the situation that I've dealt with. Like I said, I never really had that fear myself.
Wow, because I know a lot of people that when the first time they started flying, like they went into an airplane, they were like really scared because it was just like a completely new experience. At least for me, when I was a child, when my parents took me to a plane and then I saw it just go in the runway and just like go up, like it was a very interesting experience. But Ian, what was one of the greatest lessons that you learned during your time in the aviation industry?
Okay, so the first greatest or significant lesson is you've got to find your why. If you have a why that is big enough, the motivation, the reason for pursuing something, then you will achieve it. You can overcome whatever obstacles may come in the way, and you'll overcome the fears. If your why is big enough, and conversely, if it's not big enough, if you are being held back by fears or hesitations or obstacles, then again, that emphasizes the fact that the why, the motivation, hasn't been made big enough for you to get past that. So that was the first thing. And really going to the fears aspect of it, again, there may be actual physical fears, like with flying. There may actually be a real fear of being in a small plane or any plane. There may be a fear of heights. It may be a fear of so many different things. But again, if I found that when I wanted it enough, I could find a way either through or over that fear. So that's pretty much the biggest lesson I found. And then, of course, beyond that, if you put that well-known lesson, which is if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish just about anything.
No, actually, Ian, like in my previous discussions with a lot of guests, whenever I would ask them how they overcame fear, their knowing their why and being passionate about it usually tended to be something that was so strong it overcame any hurdles. Like a lot of people, like they do things that they're not passionate enough or they don't know their why. They don't know why they do the things they do. Like most people are just leaving like they're not leading like lives of meaning and purpose in which they find fulfillment because they don't know their why. So I do agree that knowing your why is the most important thing. Like I can't emphasize how important that aspect actually is.
Yeah, likewise, really is. And I will say this, that there have been things I've attempted in my life where they haven't gotten off the ground, or I haven't been able to pursue them. And I've realized, looking back, that's exactly why, because aviation was in my blood. I was passionate, and I use that word a lot, but these other things, I just, for some reason, could not find a passion to drive me through the first obstacle or the second obstacle or whatever it may have been.
So Ian, as a continuation of this previous question I asked, like, what these lessons you learn in the aviation industry, how can this be applied in the business realm? Like, what are the like some of the 2 to 3 top things that we can apply from what you learned in the aviation industry into like business or entrepreneurship in general?
Okay. Well, we've kind of touched on some key ones that we just mentioned about finding your why and motivation. That applies just as much in the business world as it does in any other aspect of life. And something that I do cover or talk about in one of my presentations when I do public speaking is I connect or find similarities between communication in flying, and between pilots and air traffic control with communication in other aspects of life, whether it be business, whether it be in personal relationships, or just in friendships. So I think that and that's a big subject. Communication is such a big thing. It can get quite charged if you want to go down certain roads on that subject. But basically, communication can make or break any relationship, business or otherwise. And that might be on a one-to-one level, or it might be on a company to consumer level. It can be anywhere between. So for me, I've really thought about how we can be conscious of our communication, how we can think about ways to communicate in a way that will draw the listener as opposed to repel, or even perhaps just enable them to be passive. We don't want to do that. In other words, rather than repel them or cause them to be passive, actually draw them to us in whatever capacity. You're asking about business right now, so in a business capacity. So that's really something that I've noticed and thought about and try to apply from my aviation experience, because in aviation, that's so structured. Communication is very structured. In fact, there are principles written and books that are written by the various authorities that direct us on how we communicate within aviation. And I'm thinking, again, mostly between pilots and controllers. I'm not necessarily talking about on the ground in other aspects. But basically, they've structured it so well. And I'm not suggesting that life be that structured, but communication in general should really have a direction. There should be some thoughts put into it. What do I want to achieve? What do I want the listener to get from it? What motivation or what action do I want to see from them in response to that? So there are some things that we can employ, these concepts, which puts thought into the communication intention, and be a little bit better and a little bit more successful with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, usually like I think it's normally a given like in business where like people think that communication like they know how to communicate, but I've realized over the years and just like interacting with other business people, like a lot of times it's a simple thing and yet it's really difficult to do because sometimes you don't know whether you're trying to be professional or you want to be informal, and there's all this balance in between, right? Like it's something that I've noticed. Like some people are just too professional and profit oriented, whereas others are just too much of a people pleaser, and then it like people don't know the fine line of that. But
Yes.
Ian, I wanted to know like what are the parallels between what pilots and air control people do, where and how and like how you can apply this in business altogether.
Okay. So expanding a little bit on what I was saying just now, there are, generally speaking, 4 steps or 4 aspects to communication between pilots and controllers. And there are ways that we can take those 4 essential or basic steps and apply them to our communication. Again, who are we talking to? Who is our customer or our audience, the listener? Who is that person? And that obviously would then open up additional information, their background, what do they experience with? What is their cultural leaning? Who are we dealing with on the other end of our conversation? Who are we? What position are we coming into that conversation from? Are we offering something? Are we providing a service of some sort? Is this just a communication of 2 peers, equals? That aspect can be of benefit. Are we? And then when it comes to pilots and controllers, what do we want? What is our objective? And where are we now? So if our objective in a conversation of any sort is to get to this point in life, or to achieve this result, or to get this product, or to provide this service, where are we now in relation to where we want to be? And how can we structure our communication to help us get there? That's just one of the tools, or one of the ideas, concepts, is that we can take from aviation and perhaps apply in other aspects of lives. And it's not as what's the word I'm looking for? Personal relationships have a lot more flexibility and perhaps a little less of this structured approach. But again, it can help us to think about what we're going to say, how it might sound and come across to the listener, and then the response that may create in them, negative or positive.
So Ian, one interesting thing I noticed is that you mentioned about basically the customer or the audience and like communication with them and knowing what they want. And I know it's like for a lot of people it's really simple, but a lot of times businesses create products and services without even knowing whether their audience or customer would even want that product and service in the first place, because they feel like from their perspective they should want it. But in reality, what they should do is like kind of like test out with like a small tested product or an MVP, like a minimal viable product where does my audience or avatar or customer want it? And it's like a simple mistake that costs businesses a lot, like a lot of businesses, because they don't actually know what their audience wants. So it's an interesting point you brought up.
Thank you. Yeah. And if I may, actually, on that point, I'm involved with an organization that is an R&D group. And one of the things that we have been heavily invested in and working on is a machine that takes household waste plastic and converts it back to oil, and use other usable products. And so what you just said made me think of that, because we're really looking for the need first. What is the need, whether it be by an individual consumer or by a larger corporation, a state, or even a country, and then finding a way to provide that product or that service that answers that need. And so we have applied that in the lead-in process to developing and working on this machine. So what you were saying just made me think of that. That's exactly how we approach that. And we're now at the point where we've just about wrapped up the R&D stage, and we're on the verge of getting an order or 2 for those machines. So anyway, you just made me think of that.
No, congratulations to that. Yeah, I was just like thinking while you were talking about like how like a lot of business owners get into a bubble where like they talk themselves because they're in love with their own product, like and then but in the process they fail to realize that, oh man, I invested all this thing in my product. Does my audience or my avatar or my customer actually would they want it? And when they don't understand why their business is failing. But it's something that I thought about. Yeah. But Ian, I wanted to ask you this question about regarding aviation. Like, what is the biggest challenge you had to face while you were in the aviation industry, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, so that's a good question. And that brings us back to what I was hinting at earlier on. For me, perhaps you wouldn't necessarily think this for someone that went into flying, but for me, the biggest challenge has always been um, a struggle with self-esteem, for want of a better way of describing it. I've always had this thing holding me back, saying, "Well, you don't, you can't do that. Um, you aren't able to do that, or you don't have the right to do that." And I think that was a lot of what drove me to keep learning and keep pushing, because I found that every time this personality trait was trying to hold me back, I would resist it and fight by trying to push harder forwards. So for me, that was probably long term. Sorry about that. It's my dog. Long term, that's probably been the biggest thing that I've had to contend with. And, it's one of those things that hasn't gone away. Maybe it's diminished a bit. It probably will never completely go away. That's just a part of my personality. But at the same time, it does drive me, because it's there. It drives me harder to offset it or to overcome it.
Ian, I really respect the fact that like even though you think you have like a self-esteem thing, you're using it as a driving factor and motivation because a lot of people would have low self-esteem, but they would use it as an excuse not to do the things that they want to do, saying that they cannot do it. So in your case, you did the opposite approach. You used it to push yourself further and further and get what you want, whereas most other people like they it's kind of like the fight or flight, like no pun intended. But yeah, like they would not do it. So what would be your advice for somebody that has low self-esteem but really wants to go into like they're really passionate about something but they don't believe that they can do it?
Well, certainly, and we've emphasized this a lot in this conversation. Certainly, getting that passion is a big part of it, because again, when you are passionate about something, it will carry you through a lot of the obstacles and things that would otherwise hold you back. It will carry you a long way in that regard. Um, in addition to that, I would say absolutely look for people that are doing what you want to do, or in the field or the direction in life that you want to go in, and ask them to help you. Maybe even approach them with the idea of having them be a mentor for you. But in other words, look to people who can help you to help you. Look to them and allow them to guide you, because there will be times and days when your own passion still isn't quite enough to carry you through the obstacles and the things that are holding you back. So have somebody else to lean on for that. Maybe it's having somebody else to be accountable to, depending on what it is you're trying to achieve. I think of dieting and weight loss, sometimes, or weight gain if you're trying to put on weight. Sometimes it's more about having someone to be accountable to when you really don't want to go to the gym. So, those are a couple of things. Educate yourself as much as you can in that field or that area that you're interested in. And I suppose if you have this luxury, do the best you can to surround yourself with people that have the same goals, the same passions, and the same direction in life. Because, they say that you are the average, shall we say, or the result of the closest people you hang around with. And so if you hang around with people that are looking to go in the same direction as you, your chances of actually doing that thing yourself go up significantly.
No, totally. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so, Ian, if what is something that you wish you had known at the beginning of like your career in aviation? And if somebody wants to start their career in aviation, like what advice would you give to them?
Another good question. So for me personally, I would say I wish I could have learned not to sweat the small stuff. I wish that I were not so hyper focused on the details of things. I do know there are times when you have to be. There are times when it's necessary. But I do know that overall, that has held me back more than it's helped me. When you have to deal with those details, I think if I had learned to focus on the big picture, the end goal, the overall view of what it was I was trying to accomplish, and just focus on that, but deal with and get on with the details, or if necessary, find someone who can help me with those details, but still me be focused on beyond those details. That probably would have helped me to keep more doors open in life than perhaps I did. So applying that specifically to aviation, one aspect of it is I do have regrets. I do wish that I had done things earlier in life, flying wise, and being more proactive. And there were plenty of times when I held myself back, and I thought I would wait for a better time, maybe not the perfect time, but better conditions. And I do wish that I hadn't. So again, a lot of that comes back to I sweated the small stuff. I got too caught up in the details and the obstacles that I could find if I looked too closely there, instead of focusing on the end goal, the end result, and saying, if I stay focused here, I will find a way to make these smaller pieces of the puzzle come together.
No, that's great. That is yeah, it's a very interesting point you make. Um, Ian, on a different note, this is a different from the question I'm asking, but it's like more about America. Like they say that America is the land of the free and the place where dreams are made. So, as a person that came from Britain to America, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, okay, so my wife is from Michigan. I'm, as you mentioned, from England. We've had a policy or an approach that all countries have something to offer, and all countries have things that are not so good. And we do our best to try and focus on the positive aspects of each country. And certainly there are many things, many positives about this country, many things that we can benefit from. I just think that it's up to the individual to take advantage of what's available within their country. Some countries do make things harder to do, and we're talking at a very high level, not specific environment here, but generally speaking, whatever is available to us, whatever we are able to do within the country, it's up to the individual to decide how much they want to capitalize on that. And what is considered successful for one person may be totally different for somebody else. And we can't really say that person's successful, but that one isn't. If that one is also doing what they're passionate about as much as the first one, then they're both successful. So really, all I can say about that is individually, if we can capitalize on the things that are available to us in the country we're in, then, we can achieve a lot. We can achieve what we want within those realms. And certainly this country does offer a lot. It does make a lot available to us if we're willing and interested in reaching out for it and pursuing that, taking advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree with the point where like you can be successful in this country if you put your whatever you want to do, you have more opportunities to make it successful. And over here, like success does mean different to different things, right? Like normally people have a certain idea of like what success is, but success to one person is di obviously different to another person.
Yeah, I remember Earl Nightingale had a recording. Used to listen to him in the old days of cassette tapes. I listened to that over and over again. He used to say, a corporate owner, a business owner with a huge corporation and many millions of dollars moving hands and flying back and forth, for him or her, if that was their desire, then they are successful. equally a housewife or somebody who's doing a job that isn't owning a business. It might be even a janitor or something of that nature. All of these are respectful careers. And if that person's goal and their passion was to do those things, they are just as successful as the person that owns a multinational corporation. It's all about what does that individual want and what is it that drives them and makes them get up each day. And that's their success. And they are as successful as the next person when they do that.
Ian, I love that you say that because I think in like today's society, a lot of people consider success is like being like a celebrity or something, like either in athletics or like movie stars like Leonardo DiCaprio or like or in if you're like looking at athletes like the great basketball players like Michael Jordan or something.
Mm.
But what they don't realize is success is whatever you're passionate about or whatever gives you fulfillment, and then you go about achieving that. They're too busy looking at other people's lifestyle and their vision and their desires and not looking into what they want to actually do. Like their definition of success is whatever the mainstream puts out rather than what they truly want.
Yeah. And comparisons, while in some ways that can be useful, it's often noted that comparing ourselves to others can have a very negative impact, like you
Yeah.
just said.
No, yeah. I just do hope like for my whoever's listening to this that like they do not define success by other people. They define success as what is their goal, what is their own personal vision, and they strive to achieve it and find fulfillment in that. And a
Mhm.
fulfilled life can also be considered a successful life, even though not like yeah, that's not what the mainstream is about. So yeah.
Yeah.
So Ian, I know you talked about the like communication and about empathy and about understanding the other person and like all the things that you learned in the aviation industry. I was actually thinking about like how it can actually be applied in like our society today. There's like a lot of divisions and a lot of different groups and everything, and it seems like they're it's a more of a narcissistic mentality where they're in their own separate bubbles, but they don't try to understand each other. So, what would be your thoughts on how they can increase, on a societal level in this nation, we can increase empathy, communication, understanding?
That's a tough one. Um, Talking about fundamental cultural changes, boy, that's tough. Um, this is probably going to sound a bit like a cliche, but it's you mentioned narcissism, and that's very true. It seems like we're seeing more and more of those qualities in society, and I think the more we see that, the more, or the only thing we can do is to increase our patience with that. To be able, to give you something or to say something that will fix society, I don't have that. But really, for those that dig deep into things like that, it does oftentimes, that's just the front, that's just the outward appearance of the individual, but there's something else going on behind the scenes that's causing those qualities to come out of them. And for those that are really looking to help individuals in that regard, it's going to take digging way beyond the surface, much deeper into that person and what might be behind these narcissistic qualities or these personality traits that are showing themselves before we can even begin to figure out how to address that. My wife is very much into psychology, and she's talked to me a bit about that. But it would take a lot of patience, a lot of empathy, a lot of understanding, even if we don't understand, and giving those people, the other person, the benefit of the doubt, choosing to find the good behind their actions rather than just perhaps the outward negative actions, but trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. That's about all I can offer on that one.
No, Ian, I think patience is a very important quality, and also like trying to understand the other person's point of view, and ultimately understanding that you're ultimately something bigger than your identity. Because a lot of like divisions come from identity. And if you realize that we are all ultimately just one, like you live for a certain amount of time, but we came from one source and we ultimately go back to one source, and identifying ourselves with that source, I think that is usually the solution.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big subject. That's a very big and deep subject.
So Ian, I know you do a lot of these public speaking engagements. Can you tell me in the audience a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so we touched on this earlier, but basically, I try to build my presentations and my talks around things that I've learned. Again, aviation has been such a central part of my life. I often find that I can find or bring similarities across from that into other aspects of life. So that's basically where it started, and I try to offer thoughts to others or points that will help them in basic ways, help them bringing, say, communication back to grassroots level, and just kind of refreshing our minds and thoughts on some of those core values that maybe we have gotten a little bit lost in life and in the rat race of our tumultuous lives that we live today. So yeah, and there are other aspects or other things that I'm working on as subjects for discussion and talks, presentations, but it's really about just trying to get back to those grassroots. That's what I'm thinking about when I'm preparing to give a speech or to give a presentation to a group of people. Let's try and have that high altitude view again, rather than get caught up in the small stuff, the tiny little details. Try to look at it from the bigger picture perspective, and look at some of those core values, those core basic areas of life that we can then build upon.
Actually, Ian, you bring up a great point. When you mentioned the high altitude, there's a thing that I always think about, and it's the 30,000 foot perspective. Because I feel a lot of people are like they get engaged in petty battles and they get dragged into things that are like microcosmic, but they don't see the big picture. And sometimes if you look from a high altitude and then you go and narrow it down to like the basic specific points, then you get to the solution a lot faster than if you started small and then from there you went bigger and bigger. But yeah, like for me, 30,000 for perspective, that's usually how I operate. I try to see the big picture, and then like it gives me like a sense of clarity.
Yes, and it's a point that you can return to when you do start to get caught up in the minutia and in the trenches, so to speak. It gives you a place to go back to, so you can refocus and get a better view of that objective. Again, come out of the grass and see the whole picture.
Ian, I don't think I would like mention this to you, but I have gone skydiving twice, and even like it's something that I really love. I really get excited whenever I did it. Like I did it both times, and when I jumped from the plane at like 120 miles an hour, it was like the most amazing rush. And then when the parachute finally came about, and then like we're just like going parachuting down, I saw the sunset on the horizon, and I saw the entire Earth, and I just realized, man, this is so small. Like everybody is like, oh, you're so small. Like we have these everyday, and then I just while I was like parachuting down, I was like, man, like our problems that we have are so petty compared to the vastness of space and time. Like in a million years, or like if you look at the big distance, everything is so big, and we need to think in big terms if we want to like have like lasting fulfillment and happiness, and like because we're ultimately part of this great one universe. And I don't know, it was just something that came to my mind that I had to share.
That's interesting. Yeah, I know you said that it would be a rush. I have to ask, what would be before you get to the edge, the lip of the doorway? What's going through your mind at that point?
I was scared out of my mind. I'm like thinking like, what if this parachute fails? But then I'm like, okay, if I do hit the earth, I'm not even gonna feel it. It's gonna be instant. And then like suddenly I get pushed, and then I'm just going. And I'm like, oh man, and I'm in this air, and I'm just falling at 100 miles an hour, and I'm literally like trusting the guy behind me to take the parachute off. But the rush is so good, and it makes you feel alive, right? Because
Mm.
you know it's like when there's a kind of like a risk with death, all of a sudden you realize that like life is so like it makes you want to live more, but like you feel alive and you feel energetic, and it gives you that rush that normally mundane life would not have. And but it also like when you're like parachuting down, like after that rush, it makes you like think about the beauty of life altogether because you see a sunset in the distance, you see everything down, and that's where my idea that's when my first thought of like the 30,000 foot perspective like started rising. I was like, man, I've been thinking things in such a small way and instead I need to think of it from this angle. Because when you like think of it from such a huge angle, like where it's like you see everything, then you can use strategies and you can use tactics to solve the individual pieces, the individual battles and all that stuff. Like it's
Mhm.
basically like I'm more like some people are for the seeing the forest for the trees and others that see trees for the forest. I'm more of the former. You have to see the macro first and then zone into the micro because once you know the micro makes more sense. But I don't know. What do you think about that?
That's true. That makes perfect sense, and I love the fact that that's an example of you being initially overcome, shall we say, by fear, but then you went past that. You found the way beyond that, even if it means someone pushing you. You found the way to get through that obstacle, and then the thrill and the exhilaration of it, and all those thoughts that you just described about this view you have as you're falling to the earth, and how that view applies to life in other ways. And just that's exactly it. That's exactly what where lessons come from, life lessons. That's
I mean,
great.
I think skydiving like it changed my perspective on a lot of things, like especially with like seeing things from for what it is. Like it also made me want to like go visit like mountains because I knew like when you're on the ground, when you're like right on the ground, you can't see the horizon that much. But when you're up there, like in a tall place or you're in the sky, you can suddenly like just get clarity. And yeah, it's what I realized, you know?
Yeah, it's a whole nother world up there. I always have enjoyed being able to take a picture when it's appropriate inside a plane in the cockpit, and then you know caption it with my view, my office view, and it's a whole different world up there. It really is.
No, yeah.
I get
But
excited just thinking about it.
yeah. But Ian, how can my audience connect with you and get to know more about you and your work and your speaking engagements and all of that?
Well, if they want to reach out to me, if they have any questions, they can do so. I can give you an email address, which is Ian, IAN, Norris, as in Chuck, Norris 007 at gmail.com. But one of the things that we're doing, and I don't know if you had intended to ask this question, but one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working as a mentor with a local high school, and we are guiding them through building. Right now, we're building two aircraft, um, small general aviation aircraft, and they're learning everything from how to use hand tools, not even touching the aircraft, but just how to use the hand tools to uh, maintenance and mechanical skills, using how to drill holes, and then to make sure that you do it in the right way for that application, and measurements and mathematics, a lot of basic skills. And in the process, we're building aircraft, which they will then get to actually fly when they're finished and approved for flight. So if anyone's interested in reading up more about that, they can look up online. They can go to tangoflight.org. That's not an initiative that I have created or started. I'm just involved with that. But It's something that we're doing in the local community. And again, it's focusing on local high school children. And if somebody has an interest in that or aviation or bringing the two together, then that might be something they could look into. But otherwise, they can reach out to me at the email address I gave and be happy to help out or answer any questions that they may have.
That is awesome, Ian. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I want to let you know that it was an honor to have you as a guest on this podcast. Like your understanding of aviation and its principles in business it's amazing, especially when it comes to communication, because I know that's often an overlooked thing. And it's like these simple things that usually like when you understand them, it leads to massive success. I do hope that you come back at a later time to this show, you know?
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I know, we didn't talk about a big aspect of one of my experiences, which was a plane crash I was in. So maybe another time we'll get a chance to talk about that, and the lessons that I learned from that. But I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much.
No, yeah, and definitely. Well, I'll ask you about that in the next time I talk to you, you know. But I want to conclude this show by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. It's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now.
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets you free. Also remember that your purchasing power is being diluted through inflation, and then the practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power by investing in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Also, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.